and welcome our big interview of the week, the man who knows the startup space in India like few others, someone who's personally invested in it, not just as someone who is, of course, running Google in Southeast Asia and India, but also someone who is one of our most prolific angel investors, Rajan Anandan. It's a pleasure really having you on the program, sir. You've said that fittest, fastest, and most fundable are usually, the mantra, if I may call it that, when you're sort of looking at startups that, you would perhaps want to put your weight behind. How does the space really look to you at the moment? There are all those, of course, who are saying it's buzzing and the world's watching startups in India. How does it look to you?
Look, I think it's very exciting, because India has 350 million internet users. By the end of this year, we'll have 160 million smartphone users. And by 2017, we'll have 500 million Indians online and 300-400 million smartphone users, right? So in any ecosystem, what is most important for you to have a large number of consumers who are online, spending a lot of time and beginning to do different things, right? So India's internet used to be largely about messaging, social, video, etc. But now actually we're seeing users beginning to do lots of other different things. They're transacting, they're beginning to learn, they're beginning to get their healthcare information online, and so on and so forth. So the most important thing for a startup ecosystem is for there to be a large number of users who are spending a lot of time. So there we're well beyond the inflection point, right? The second thing that's very, very important in an ecosystem is to have companies that have already shown the way and become role models, right? So 5 years ago, we didn't have a single unicorn startup in India. Today we have 8. 8 is a big number, right? And what's interesting is I think 6 out of the 8 founders are actually between sort of 27 and 32, right? So you've actually built, here are 20-year-olds who've basically started up and built billion-dollar companies, right? So I think that's very, very important. And the third one is you want to make sure that there's enough capital in the ecosystem, enough mentoring, and so on and so forth, which is beginning to come together. So I think we're at a very, very interesting standpoint. I do think there's a lot of people who are saying, is it getting too frothy? Is it getting too buzzy, et cetera, et cetera? Look, it's like anything else, right? Look, when a space gets to be very interesting, right? Many companies get funded in that space. The reality is the winning player in that space will be worth a whole heck of a lot more than they're worth today. But also the reality is that many companies in the space will either get consolidated or go out of business because not everybody can actually get to the kind of scales that you can.
And that's healthy, you think?
Yeah, that's just the way it is. I mean, it's Darwin's theory of that's just the way it is, right? It applies to human beings. It applies to startups. So a few will become very, very successful. Many will get consolidated, and a large number will kind of go away. And I think that's just the way startups work, right? And
so it's but would it be, there are all those critics who sort of sit back and say it's heating up too fast and it's going to go the dot-com bubble way. Yeah. How would you
look? I mean, the way I look at this is, we may have had a significant correction in the US in March of 2000. But if you look at where the internet is today compared to March of 2000, we are about 1,000x bigger on every front. Number of users 100x bigger, number of value created probably 1,000x, right? I mean, we're just a whole different place. When I look at the Indian internet ecosystem, if you look at, I like comparing things to test cricket.
I see.
Right? You've got 5 test matches. Right. We're still in the first test of the series.
I see.
And we are probably in the 3rd day of the first test.
I see. Okay.
So we have a long way to go. Now, between now and 2025, when India is going to have 700-800 million users, we'll have an e-commerce ecosystem that's $200 billion. We're going to have bumps in the road, right? We will have periods where things will correct and things will not. But at the end of the day, what I look at is a 10 to 15-year view to say what is going to happen to an ecosystem, right? So it's still very, very, we've come a long way, but it's still very, very early, right? E-commerce this last year was 5 billion. This year is 10 billion of gross merchandise value. That number becomes 50 billion by 2020 and becomes 250 billion by 2025. So we're going to go from 10 billion to 250 billion in a decade. That's going to create several companies that are going to have, revenues of, 20-30 billion dollars each at a minimum, right? And those are going to be huge companies, right? So to look at it today and say, oh my God, this is, it's like, okay,
see the long view.
Really. You've got to just take the long view, right? And I think that's what's really, really important is. So are a whole bunch of companies going to go out of business? Absolutely. That's just the way startups work, ecosystems work, right? But are the winners going to become significantly larger and worth significantly more than they are today? Absolutely, right? And that's why there's a premium on leadership, right? So if you look at the number 1 player in any space, they're valued at 3 to 4 times what the next player is, because the investors are betting that is the player that's going to win, right? But what you're seeing in some spaces today is that several companies are being valued as the winner.
Absolutely.
But as we know, there's only one winner.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, obviously, some spaces will have 2 or 3 large players, and that's fine. I mean, e-commerce, I think, is going to be a space where we'll have multiple
Sure.
large players.
Right. So that is possible. There is going to perhaps be room for more than one.
Oh, absolutely.
big
I mean, if you look
player.
at e-commerce in India with 200 or 250 billion dollars of GMV 10 years from now, right? There will be several players. Now, there will be 1, 2, 3. There'll be a stack rank, right? But
Right.
there'll be several large players, right?
Right.
Now, who are those players going to be? You know,
Right,
what
right.
exactly are they going to do?
Right.
I mean, those things will evolve over a
Sure.
period of time because, again,
Yeah.
it's a 5-test series. We're in the first test, and it's day 3 of the first test. So we have
Right.
to see who wins the first test.
Right.
Then we have to play the second test.
Right.
We've got many test matches to go.
Right. So when you're looking at the startup space and sort of you've sort of identified the kind of areas that you like to operate in, how do you sort of go by, this is what I want, this is what, I believe that this is going to be, I'm going to put my money on this. How do you is there a gut instinct to this? Is there a science to this? How does someone like
so
you
look, I
decide?
mean, I've been angel investing for a long time, right? Starting in the US. And in India, I've been in India, this is my 10th year, so I've been investing for 10 years in India. Angel investing for 10 years. So look, in India, I only invest in tech companies.
Right.
I only invest in spaces that I really understand. So if I don't understand, what a company is doing or understand space, I won't invest because I just don't think I can make a,
Sure.
informed decision about whether to do it. I only invest in tech founders. Out of the 60 investments I've done so far in India, startup investments, I think there are only 3 that don't have tech founders. They tend to be content-driven businesses, right? So those are fine if the co-founding team is not deep tech, but otherwise, has to be a tech-driven founder. And I only invest in companies that, have shown some level of traction, right? So I get a lot of companies, startups that approach me with a business plan. I'll never invest in that. Because my view today is, to launch a tech startup, right? Whether it's an app, whether it's consumer internet, or whether it's even a B2B SaaS company or big data company, etc. You should be able to build something and get it out there and either get, a couple of thousand consumers using it or getting 2 businesses to, become beta customers without raising external funding, right? Because, because the cost of entry to become a startup have actually literally gone down to 0,
Really,
right?
yeah,
2 smart
absolutely.
developers
Yeah.
working out of home,
Absolutely.
free credits from Google or Amazon or
Exactly,
Microsoft,
yeah.
access to 1,
And
2 laptops, and boom, you're in business, right? So I want to see some level of traction. So I think those are the things that I kind of look for, and I try to stay true to that, right? So for instance, I get approached by startups that seem to be doing very interesting things, but I don't understand those spaces, so I don't invest.
I see.
Because I can't make an informed decision, I can't
Right.
say whether it's really a good idea or not, and more importantly, I can't add value, right? Because
Right.
I want to invest in things where I can add some level of value.
And that's actually going to be my next question, which is, when we talk about adding value, mentoring startups is very important because, like you're saying, this is a young country. People, like all those with tech backgrounds who have great ideas, who believe they can sort of be change makers. They've got ideas. They believe they can sort of, really drive change, add value, etc. How important do you think is mentoring beyond just perhaps arming someone with the funds to say, here's the capital start off?
Yeah, I think from an investor standpoint, angel investor standpoint, I actually think it's very, very important for angel investors to both invest in companies they understand and also be helpful to companies, right? Because I worry that today, it's become very fashionable to
Absolutely.
become an angel investor. I think it's a very risky fashion business to be in, right? Because the reality is only 1 out of 10 will become a hit,
Right.
right? So if you invest in 5 or 6, you may actually lose all your money, right? And that's 1 out of 10, by the way, is a hit if you're very good and lucky, right? Both those things are going to play into it. So I think as an investor, you need to kind of, my belief is you should invest in things you understand where you can add some value. Now, in terms of, for a startup, it's very important that their investors help where they can help, right? So for instance, I don't have a lot of time. I run Google 18 hours a day, and then I kind of, do angel investing. So I tend to be very, very targeted. So number one, if a startup needs help and they call me, I will always help where I can, right? And where I can help is really only in a few areas, right? I can help hiring early set of employees because I've got a large network now in India. Some of my most successful startups have, heads of sales, heads of marketing, some heads of engineering that have come from companies that have been in startups that I've invested, 5, 10 years ago, right? So talent is one place. Second, just thinking through the business model. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to build companies where at some point you have to make revenue and at some point you have to make profit.
Right.
And the sooner you start at least thinking about that,
Yeah, that's right.
more likely you'll end up with a viable business model, right? So I think thinking through the business model is an area I can help. I think I can help on things like digital distribution, right? Given kind of what I do during the day, how do I get to a large number of users? What are the most effective channels? If it's a B2B, I've actually spent 20 years of my life selling to enterprises. So how do you actually build a interesting B2B kind of sales engine, etc. And then lastly, when a startup comes up for raising Series A or B or C, helping them connect with the right set of venture capitalists, and because I'm very careful about what I refer.
Right.
to the VC community, and
Right.
and so it's just a little easy, makes it a little easier for them
Right.
to be considered by
Right.
the VC community. So those are really the areas,
Sure.
right? If it's really getting into the code and making sure that it's scalable infrastructure, I mean, that's not something that I'm going to get into, but I know people who can actually help like that
Yeah.
in terms of being able to look at the code and look at whether it's going to scale infrastructure or not. So those are the kinds of so my approach is, I'm on call, right? When startups need me, they call me. After I invest for some 3-6 months, I'll try to stay a little more engaged where I can be helpful or be proactive. But after that, really, it's up to them whether they call me or not. And generally, what I find is, the better startups are are better at leveraging me,
Yeah,
my time,
okay.
because they'll just reach out and
can
ask for
believe
help,
it,
and I always help,
Right.
right? And others don't, and I'm fine with both models.
Right.